This is the DRS train.
Welcome to the DRS Train podcast. This service is the 2024 Bahrain Grand Prix. I'm your driver, Peter Brook, and your conductor today is Nav F1. Welcome, Nav.
Hi, Peter. Such an exciting race to look at.
Indeed. Also joining us today, we have a new guest, Wimbo Formula. Wimbo, welcome to the DRS Train podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here. I saw a race with plenty of stuff to talk about, so let's have a great podcast.
So yeah, Formula One is back, and I mean, I can't, considering that we have, same drivers, same teams, same regulations, I can't say I'm particularly shocked that not much has changed. So yeah, Nav, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I think let's just start by addressing the obvious. Red Bull picks up exactly where they left off, as you said. Quali was interesting because technically Verstappen didn't have the fastest lap. Well, not technically, he didn't have the fastest lap of the quali session. Leclerc did. But in the race, I mean, we thought it would be interesting, maybe. At least the general consensus was that we might have a closer race than we had in the latter part of 2023, but we got Verstappen winning by 22 seconds, and that included probably him not pushing that much towards the end of the race. So, you can't fault Red Bull, you can't fault Verstappen. They're doing what they have to do. Yes, the season doesn't start in the best of ways for the fans, but they're doing the job they have to do. And what can you say? They were faultless yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, with Red Bull, obviously, yeah, things have been kind of going swimmingly on track, despite everything being quite turbulent off track. That doesn't seem to have affected how the race ran, or even with the potential of losing Christian almost during the weekend, that doesn't seem to have affected them. I'm not sure what to make of that, but there seems to be something going on with a power struggle with everyone at the top at Red Bull, and yeah, it's a very strange situation, that.
Yeah, Wimbo, what do you make of the whole situation, especially concerning the power struggles that have involved Jos against Marco and Horner?
Well, I have theories about it. I think it all started in last year when Helmut Marko made these comments about Checo Perez being South American and less consistent. I think that Horner took that opportunity to finally be rid of the powerhouse that was above him controlling things, and he wanted that position. So that became blown up in the media. Helmut Marko didn't take to that very well, and Helmut Marko has a big ally in the Verstappen group, and they're loyal to a T. So they remembered that, and when this grievance came from the employee that worked with Horner, they grabbed their opportunity to be rid of Christian Horner, and I already suspected it when the Telegraaf, a Dutch mediocre newspaper journalist, Erik van Haren, was involved in every time something leaked, it was from him. And yeah, eventually Jos last night talked to the Daily Mail and said that Horner can't stay at Red Bull because he'll rip the team apart with all the controversy. And he also said that he wasn't involved in the leaking of the big file with all the pictures and the WhatsApp messages. So yeah, make that of what you want. It's a pretty big mess. One thing I do know is that Max Verstappen is so focused on racing itself that it won't bother his performance on track. He'll not let it interfere with anything on track. So I don't expect it to have any influence on him. And whether Jonathan Wheatley is congratulating after the race, or Christian Horner, or Hannah Smits. It doesn't matter to Max Verstappen. So yeah, that's my thoughts about it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's unlikely to affect Max in terms of his in terms of his own racecraft and performance, unless he was involved directly, because he just seems to be so kind of laser focused and just so stone cold looking on the racing. I mean, this is the thing that's becoming really remarkable about him, because what he's doing is not necessarily new in terms of we've seen, Schumacher, Vettel, Hamilton, they've all had their sustained periods of dominance. Max seems to have just elevated that even further because he doesn't have off days. I mean, we saw that even in qualifying, that he got because obviously at the end of the day, Leclerc was the one who got the fastest lap in qualifying overall. Max still got pole, and he was still like apologizing on the radio, but he still got pole. And you can see that's the kind of mentality he has, is that's still I don't want to beat everyone, I want to destroy them.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, as you said, you mentioned Schumacher, Vettel, Hamilton. I felt personally that during their eras of dominance, they would still get quite involved with off-track issues. So you would get Vettel with the whole multi-21 issues. Obviously, that was because Webber was closer to him than Perez is right now. But he would get involved with Webber and with Ricardo getting promoted. There would be some off-track issues. Schumacher, obviously, famously, he was basically a second team principal at Ferrari and always needed to have a say in everything. Lewis, loads of off-track issues, loads of off-track commitments, I would say. And it's just ruthless. I think the word is ruthless, because no one can really see him not beating his record of consecutive wins. And no one can really see him basically not winning for a while. What is his competition? I mean, I know Ciaron couldn't be here today, but he was telling us in private yesterday, who is his main just competitor to beat him right now? Leclerc, we're going to get onto him soon. He's not right there at the moment. Norris, not right there. Alonso and Hamilton, you just know the primes are starting to dwindle. So Verstappen is at the top of his game, and Formula One has a Verstappen problem for sure. It's sad to say, but he is a bit too good at the moment. He is the cream of the crop by quite some margin.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see that as a problem. I've started watching Formula One in 2015. There was no title fight there then, and Mercedes was dominating, and that lasted for 7-8 years. We did get a title fight in 2016 when Rosberg stopped sleeping with his wife and got himself into a different mindset to beat Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton had a few off weekends. He was a bit unfortunate with a DNF at some point, and that's how Rosberg won. And nowadays, that season gets hailed for being super competitive, but those two were always on the podium. So what's happening now is not very different for me than many other seasons that I've seen, bar 2016 and 2021. With Max being this good, at the end of the day, he only does his job. He puts the car on pole, he drives off, he doesn't make any mistakes, and he finishes the race in the best way he can. I made a tweet this morning saying that maybe Max Verstappen should adapt a more showman's, like what do you call it? A more showbiz kind of approach to his racing. Complain about a minor issue on the radio a few times, or say that his tires are gone and then set a few fastest laps, or at least thank the crowd that they're the best crowd ever. Just a little bit more showmanship to entertain the people, because that's what people complain about as well, that he's kind of boring and only wants to talk about racing. So I don't think you can fault Max Verstappen for anything, and F1 has survived many dominant eras.
He's very down to earth. He does come across very much like an ordinary bloke. He doesn't give off that sense of the sense of charisma, I suppose, you would get from somebody like Lewis. And you see this in his lifestyle because he races and then he goes home and just sits on his sim rig and does even more racing. I mean, we saw a little bit of complaining because he is somebody who he is known to complain and get angry when things don't go his way. It's just that these days that doesn't happen very often. In practice, for example, he was complaining about the upshifts and downshifts feeling awful, and he did that a lot last year. But the only time he had any genuine problems with his gearbox was Jeddah qualifying, and I think no, Kota, that was the brakes, wasn't it? Yeah, that's the only time it ever came up, and he was doing it again in practice. Some people were joking that maybe because he spent all winter just on his sim rig, the gear shifts are much smoother on a game than they are in real life, and maybe that's what that was. Yeah, he could, but yeah, he's somebody who he doesn't give much off because yeah, he'll win a race and doesn't act much like he cares because I guess it's become second nature now. But in terms of him elevating himself, I think one thing that does stand out compared to previous eras of dominance is partly that the cars never break down because in this race everybody finished it again, but also how close the field spread is, because people are saying that drivers like Leclerc and Russell and Norris, they're in their primes and it's basically being wasted because Max is winning everything. But the field spread is so narrow. We saw that in qualifying. There was less than a second covering the top 10. I mean, Leclerc and Verstappen broke ahead a bit, but third to ninth was 3/10 covering them? That's unheard of because we would have had, I mean, Schumacher was usually at least half a second ahead. The 92-93 Williams, it could have been as much as 2 seconds ahead in qualifying. That's the kind of gaps we used to have, and now we just don't have those. And that gives you an idea of how refined and how well oiled both he himself and the team are. That the gaps are that narrow, and he can still get pole every time, and he can still break out into a 20-second lead over his teammate as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually brings us to the second performer, or the guy who qualified second for the Bahrain Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc, because expectations were high for Charles. Max was Max, and people expected him to win. But then Charles comes up with just very good pace in quali generally. That's definitely not something we're not accustomed to. He always has good pace, and actually, I would have said it's a good thing that he didn't get his Q3 lap right, because that would have been yet another Leclerc pull to Verstappen win. Peter, how many of those do we have already? 12? 13?
I think it's more than that now. I thought it was about 16 or... No, maybe it's about 12 or 13 because I think Leclerc's his pole to win conversion rate is 17%, which is one of the worst in Formula One history. Whereas Max's is going to be well over 50%. It's probably closer to 70-80%.
I think it's like 70%. But yeah, so Leclerc didn't get the lap right. But what do we make of his race? Because we found out that apparently there were brake issues and that it's the reason why he kept locking up at turn 10. But, well, yeah, just Peter and then Wimbo. What do we think about that? Do you think he should have managed it better, or maybe a driver of his caliber, if he realizes that there is a braking issue, should adapt his driving earlier? Because as we saw, it did stop after, 8 or 9 laps of constant locking up. So there was a solution. It's not that it was a terminal issue, but it was very worrying to see one of the main competitors of Verstappen just not figure out how to take a corner adequately.
Well, you can look at the situation in 2 ways. You could say that Leclerc messed up maybe in his setup, and that's why the issues were there. But I like to see it from the positive side, and that despite having all these problems, he still managed to get P4 and beat Russell, for instance. Sainz didn't have any problems, and he got P3. which is pretty obvious. But despite having all these problems, ruining his tires every time at turn 10, still he didn't give up. He kept putting in these, good lap times, and he finished P4, which is damage control. Obviously, they need to look at the data and to make sure that it doesn't happen again next race. But yeah, if somebody can tell me that it was an issue in his own setup, then I'll blame him for what happened yesterday. But if not, then it's just unfortunate, and he made the best out of it.
My first assumption was that it was him, basically, because this wasn't a problem he'd had in quali or in practice. I mean, turn 10, that's the main challenge at Bahrain, because the circuit in general is very tough on brakes. But turn 10, because it's this kind of off-camber corner and you have to turn and brake at the same time, people lock up there all the time. But he was the only one doing it. And I thought, okay, well, if this is a setup problem, because of part Fermi, his setup's going to be the same as it was yesterday, and he wasn't doing this in qualifying. Unless you can argue on heavy fuel, it makes it worse. Eventually, once he dropped down to 5th, by the second stint, that was when he said the car was pulling to the right when he was braking. It's like, okay, maybe there's some kind of minor issue affecting him. He salvaged 4th in the end because I think they said that George was having problems with the battery or power unit, so he was a bit down on power, so he got past him eventually. But even without those problems, I don't think he was necessarily a contender for the win or to even challenge Max, because Max got out of DRS range he did a Vettel and got out of DRS range by the end of the first lap and just took off. But otherwise, maybe he could have finished second because he had a bit of battle with Sainz. Sainz was very racy and he rightfully got driver of the day, even if at the end of the race he couldn't catch up to Perez to take second.
Yeah, devil's advocate there. We did see Ricardo, Russell, and Checo all lock up at that turn, and I think we saw a few others lock up, but that was once or maximum twice. There was definitely an issue there because Leclerc didn't have issues with that turn in the previous years. But yeah, my personal concern is that it took so much time for him to figure out how to fix it. Regardless of whether it was a setup issue or a mechanical issue, he did sort it out. So that means there was a solution, but it can't take 10 turns. Because imagine if, yes, yesterday there was no chance of a win. But if it was in a race where he could get P1, you would expect him to sort it out quicker. And, maybe it was a hard issue to fix. But I was just shocked at the fact it took 10 turns to fix. And then another thing is that Sainz has since come out and said he had similar issues. Now, this seems like a massive PR move to just seem better in the eyes of the public and be like, oh yeah, Charles had these issues and he struggled. I also had them, but I was completely fine. I don't think he had those issues because you don't have one driver locking up, I think it was 6 times, and the other not locking up at all, especially when Sainz is a good driver, but not exactly a world beater. So you can already see some mind games settling in as Sainz realizes that he will not be backed up by his team this year. He will be on his own. Best example of this is that he overtook Leclerc on track before the first round of pit stops. Then they stop Leclerc first. Leclerc undercut Sainz, and then Sainz has to overtake him again. Did that cost him P2? Not a lot of people were talking about it, but I think it played a role in it.
Yeah, what I thought was really striking was that Sainz was on his own celebrating his 3rd place. When he got out of the car, there was no Ferrari people there to greet him.
Yeah, that video went viral on Twitter, and that kind of everyone's reading into that because obviously we know the circumstances that Leclerc has a multi-year contract. He's there for a long time, but we know that this is Sainz's final year because next year Lewis Hamilton is going there. We still don't know where Sainz is going next year, but this it's not that often that teams know or drivers know before the season has even started that this is their final year. It's usually often maybe by the summer that they start contract negotiations and everything. So that does affect things, because again, Leclerc is the number one, and he's been the number one since he basically usurped Vettel 5 years ago. And it's not really the plan is not really working, or il plan, whatever there is in Italian, is not really working out, because he's not destroying Sainz. And this, again, with the brake issue, is that with Leclerc, he's not someone who seems to have much in the way of technical understanding in the way that Sainz does. And so Sainz, if Sainz had the same problem, you might have thought, okay, if I adjust the brake balance or do this or whatever, that will help it. Leclerc seems to be the kind of person where it's like, give me a good car and I'm going to just drive it really fast. Whereas, and he's also not brilliant. He has a very passive take on race strategies, which again Sainz does not. So even if even if Sainz is maybe just his raw pace isn't as good, he's a bit more well-rounded than Leclerc, because Leclerc, the thing about him is that he has peaks and troughs. His peaks are higher than anyone else's, but then his troughs are also lower than anyone else's. That's his problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two things. Leclerc does like a more pointy front, so I think that didn't help in terms of turn 10. But secondly, just you did a good praise of Sainz there, because he is such an unknown quantity for 2025. Usually when a driver is basically sacked, well, he leaves a team, not only is it late in the year, but usually there is a clear candidate for their destination. And this time he could go to either of Merc, Red Bull, or obviously Audi / Sauber / Stake, whatever. And I'd say it's like a third of chances either way. Like he could go to any of those. Maybe less likely to Red Bull, because I don't think he wants to be Verstappen's number 2. But there's not an obvious path for Sainz at all. So he really can make his own path here. He can decide of his own fate.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see where he's going to go next season. And usually there are signs where he can go. Some people are saying that he might join Stake before it becomes Audi, but then it's not entirely sure if Audi is going to be there in 2026. Some people have said because of his Red Bull past and how he was very level with Verstappen in that first year in 2015, he might go to Red Bull. It could be a straight up driver swap between Hamilton and Sainz, and he'll go to Mercedes. Him replacing Alonso in Aston Martin is not a bad place for him to be. So, there's many options. But there's one thing I've written down when we were just talking about Leclerc. I'm not a very technical F1 fan, but I've read that Leclerc's brakes had 2 different temperatures. One side of his brakes were a lot hotter than the other side. I don't know what that signifies or anything. And another thing is, does a driver need to have this strategic ability to become a world champion? Because at the end of the day, a team needs to give a driver a great car, and a driver just needs to drive it and win enough races to become world champion. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
That's a good point, but when the team in question is a Ferrari F1 team, you do want a driver who can make their own decisions, because it's not exactly Hannah Schmitz making the calls. It's what's the I forgot the name. Sorry?
Xavi?
Yeah, Xavi and the other guy, but yeah, Xavi, it's him making the calls. So that's why I do think you need someone who can go against whatever the teams say. But that's particularly the case for Ferrari at the moment. But I get your point that usually you want a team that can just make those calls.
It's yeah, I mean the thing is basically all champions have been well-rounded drivers. There aren't many that you would say, oh, their only thing was that they could drive quickly in a race. I mean, probably one of the best two of the best examples off the top of my head of ones that really were well-rounded would be Prost and Lauda, because as well as having exceptional race pace, they also knew how to play strategies. They had fantastic technical understandings. I mean, Prost, maybe he would sacrifice. He wasn't a bad qualifier. It's just that he intentionally sacrificed quali pace for race pace, which, to be honest, makes perfect sense. Because at the end of the day, the points come on race day. But yeah, Leclerc, like, if you gave him an outright dominant car, he would just destroy everyone. But there are too many weaknesses in terms of his lack of technical understanding, his indecisiveness and kind of passive take on strategies, and letting people that seem to have no clue what they're talking about decide the strategies for him. He's also not brilliant in wet weather. I can't think of many wet weather performances that really stand out as well. So that's another thing. Whereas people like Max, Lewis, Vettel, Schumacher, they're all exceptional wet weather drivers. So there's a few things going on there, but yeah, it's just if he had, there are some things the team needs to improve, but there are things that he himself needs to improve as well.
But would you say Lewis Hamilton is a great strategic mind? Because what I've seen of him in the last 7-8 years is that whenever they put an option to him, what do you think, Lewis? Hards or mediums? He goes, I don't know, man. You decide. And then they make the decision, and then he goes, oh man, I don't know if that's the right choice.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis is an interesting one. I mean, I think for him, he kind of stands out a bit because he's had continuous access to such good cars and such well-oiled teams. Everyone knows his strengths. I mean, obviously, very fast, excellent qualifier, exceptional wet weather driver. But yeah, he's not somebody who's very good at planning strategies himself. He usually tends to ask the team, what do you think works? He may not be able to read. I mean, we hear him saying, oh, the tires are dead, or my tires are gone, when they're obviously not. Sometimes he will challenge the team, but they seem to put their foot down. Like Bono is no, just do this, Lewis. We know what we're talking about. He doesn't seem to be able to read races in the same way. I haven't seen much evidence that he's someone who's very good when it comes to car development either, because from what I heard, he only started doing simulator work in 2021 because he needed that when he was fighting Max. Before that, he didn't really do that. He used to never do track walks either. He is somebody who's like, give me a good car and I'll drive it better than anyone else. Yeah, but just doesn't have. But he's made up for that because his driving is so good, and because the cars he's always have been so good as well.
Yeah, you get many drivers in that situation. Peter, one thing that could interest you is that Xavi Padros, Leclerc's infamous strategist, he was a team engineer at HRT for 3 years.
Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, HRT, well, their strategy, I mean, I can't really give much of analysis of their strategies because every so often they're like, well, we need to try something different just to see if we can keep up, but usually didn't work. Although, to be honest, Malaysia 2012, that was an inspired decision to start on the wets. But yeah, I didn't know that, to be fair.
Yeah, he was on the side of HRT that always had different drivers, so Yamamoto, clean, and whatever.
The second seat, yeah, the one that swapped around.
Exactly. But yeah, good that we mentioned HRT actually, because from one horrendous backmarker at the start of the 2010s to apparently a new backmarker we had this year, we talked about the first, the front rows of the grid, and Red Bull and Ferrari just delivering, picking up from where we saw them last year. Somehow one team has found a way in an era where there are very few changes between the cars, basically none. They have found a way to just lose half a second from I think it was their FP2 time from last year. God knows how that has happened, but leave it to Alpine to surprise us in the bad way every single year. So from perennial midfielders, the definition of mid, as I like to call them, because they were not bad, they were never good, they were just mid, they were in the midfield with the with two of the most mid drivers on the grid, Ocon and Gasly, who are not bad. I hate when people say they're bad and they shouldn't be there. No, they are F1 drivers who deserve to be on the grid, but they're never going to be a world champion, and they're never going to be bottom of the pack, just dishing out horrendous performances every other week. They are the definition of midfield. But Alpine have found a way to pull out one of the biggest stinkers, at least modern stinkers in recent time, and just qualify, well, qualify P19 and was it, yeah, P19 and P20 with, you know, two drivers who shouldn't be there, and with even more political turmoil within the team.
I blame the nose. That's a very fat nose they've got on the car. It looks like what is now an old gen F2 car. I don't see what much has changed. Obviously, not painting it because they say, "Oh, this is the pink livery." It's like, well, where's the pink? And then we got the blue livery. Like, where's the blue? Not painting it to save weight obviously hasn't helped them. I wasn't too shocked because they said in testing they weren't impressed with times, and I think they've tried the kind of statements that Gasly and Ocon made after qualifying. It was definitely damage limitation because I guess they knew that it was going to be bad, and I guess we have to try and pick things up. The thing is, that there was a noticeable gap in qualifying. In the race pace, they weren't really that far back. I mean, they finished a net last because Bottas and Sargent both had problems. Slow pit stop and then something wrong with his brakes, so that's why they finished behind. Without that, they would have finished at the back, but they weren't miles off everyone else. So the race pace is a little bit better. Of course, one thing that hasn't helped is that immediately after the race, they lost both their technical director and their head of aerodynamics have gone. So from a team that last year had effectively no staff, I mean, if you told me that Ocon and Gasly were running the team themselves, it wouldn't have surprised me. So now I don't know how that's not going to help them. It's not exactly an attractive team to try and join if they want a new technical director and all of that. So I part of me wonders if they might even last the season if people are going to keep dropping off like this.
I think there's plenty of people that want to get into Formula One, and if Alpine is thinning out, then new spots are going to be available for new people wanting to join, coming in. And another thing is that a season is so incredibly long these days with 24 races. I can totally see it happening that they're going to be this bad for 15 races, and then all of a sudden a certain upgrade will give them performance, and they'll start beating the teams around them and start scoring a few lucky points, and they're going to finish P8 where I have them in my prediction video. So it's all not lost. It doesn't look good at the minute, but things can change. Last year we were laughing at McLaren at this stage. Now I do have to agree that there was less turmoil in McLaren. They just have a lot of good staff in the right positions at McLaren that needed to come out, and it did eventually. But I don't think they'll finish as bad as it is now. That's my idea anyway.
Yeah, and I think that they'll catch up, but I don't necessarily think they'll pull a McLaren and jump forward that far. I mean, McLaren is better organized, they have better staff, and they have better drivers. So it's all just kind of coming together. But it's just that it doesn't look like a very attractive prospect for people to join or even to invest to, because Team Enstone, it's had in the past 30 years, it's had brief moments of competency, for lack of a better word. I mean, early 2000s, mid 90s, when they won their titles and all of that. But this, it's also because it's meant to be this French national team, but their base is in England. I mean, the engines are based in Vichy-sur-Châsillon or whatever it's called, outside Paris. So you could just get rid of them and throw anything else there. I mean, I was saying yesterday, I want it to be just proper British team. Let's just have Team Vauxhall, sponsored by Bristol Street Motors, some grubby team that by all accounts should be in touring cars, but they've managed to make a Formula One team or something like that. But also, if they do, God forbid, if they do end up collapsing, that's also difficult because they've got quite. We'll get onto this later, but they have quite an elaborate driver academy. There's a lot of people in there, but they've got Jack Doohan. He, for some reason, is hanging around in the paddock, hoping that he can just get a seat next year, I guess, off the back of what's probably going to be one FP1 session, probably in Yas Marina. And then it's what Victor Martin, Sophia Flörsch, Nicholas Solov, Kushmini, and Gabriele Mini. That's all of them, isn't it? Solov. Yeah. So there's quite a few, and fairly all quite a lot of potential in them. So that might be if they all need new homes if the team goes. Yeah, I think the main thing that surprised me with them is that they were the slowest when a lot of people thought that Haas would be back there with them, and they were marginally better than last year when they said, our car's 2 months behind on development or whatever, but Alpine had no one to really fight with.
Yeah, that's insane. I had no idea. I just didn't believe the rumors from last week when people were saying Alpine could be slowest, because I'm stressing this point. 2023 to 24, there really are not that many technical changes or developments. So I have no idea how you go half a second back, and I didn't want to believe it. Instead, it happened. The driver's trying to be positive, but Ocon is probably ringing up Toto every minute to try to get the 25 seat, and Gasly must be looking for somewhere. I have no idea where that could be. And yeah, Peter, you mentioned Haas. I think it's a good time to mention the other backmarkers who were meant to be where Alpine are, basically. So Sauber and Haas, they qualified down the pecking order, but their racers by Zhou and Kevin Magnussen, the drivers of the pairing that were not affected by external issues, because Hülkenberg got a bad start and was sent at the back, and Bottas had this horrendous pit stop. But Zhou and Magnussen both made up 6 places from their starting spot. And Haas have seemingly sorted out their tire warmer issues and also the tire deck, because last year they used to be just pathetic in terms of tire conversation. Yes, speak to your tires. Tire conservation. And this year Magnussen is just running not only in P12 but defending on the V-carb, Toro Rosso, whatever, which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, at a glance, it seems that they fixed that. I mean, obviously the big year for them, 2019 was the first year that we really noticed this problem. And I suppose Bahrain, that was one of their weak circuits, because a lot of their problems with tire issues has been long straights and slow corners, because it means that the tires cool down faster. They like circuits that have lots of long sweeping corners and fast ones, and Bahrain doesn't have so many of those. Yeah, I was surprised by Magnussen because Hülkenberg, he's done this before. I mean, he did it the race before this, Abu Dhabi last year. He qualified to P3 and then had a crap start and just disappeared in the race. Yeah, he gets hit at the start and then has to pit. But then he managed to beat both Alpines at the end, even with having to pit on that one. But Magnussen, he finished 12th, and he'd started 15th. And again, that was not bad. So it looks like they fixed that at long last. Maybe all that they needed to do was get rid of Gunter. Maybe that's what it was. Because he was at the race, actually, because he's doing commentary for RTL, I think, or maybe the Austrian broadcasters. They got him in at the last minute, so he was interviewed by Sky Sports. So he can just kind of laugh at his old team now, because he didn't really leave in a particularly good on particularly good terms, I suppose.
I think one of the downsides of the budget cap is that these teams can maintain themselves by being the worst team or the second worst team and still make a profit or do it at very low cost. I don't have the idea that either Alpine or Haas are investing to the max to get the most out of the season. I jokingly, how you did in a manifest, Peter, I sometimes put up the option to have a relegation system where the 11th team is prepared to step in whenever the 10th team is not performing. You know, like we wouldn't have missed Haas in 2021 scoring 0 points. It would have been nicer to have another color on the grid.
Kramer.
It's interesting because it's interesting because we had a WEC preview a few days ago, so the Endurance Championship, and in WEC, or at least Le Mans, there's a reserve list for teams that could be let in if another team drops out or is just thrown out because they're not fast enough. So that would actually work somehow in Formula One. Just put a third Red Bull and put Liam Lawson in it instead of having 2 Alpines or 2 Haas's.
But yeah, so Haas, I guess they fixed things. Whether or not they're going to provide much in terms of being interesting, just it remains to be seen. I mean, I should say that actually Hulkenberg, he wasn't hit; he was the one doing the hitting. So at the start, he hit Stroll. I think Bottas maybe got caught up in that too. So yeah, that's not. I mean, it's stuff like this when people say, "How can you go 200 races and no podiums?" It's like, well, look at starts like that. That might give you some evidence of why it hasn't happened yet. But then Sauber /Stake/Kick Sauber, things seem better as well. I mean, they qualified 16th and 17th. It's like, okay, well, that's no different. We had the Alpines and them sandwiching Logan Sargent. So Q1 was exactly what you would expect from last year, more or less. But then Joe, he was very racy. He finished 11th. At the end, I was so sure that he would catch Stroll, who was on much older tyres, but he just drifted backwards. I thought he was going to get a point. Bottas, though, he had another howler of a pit stop, and he was stuck there for 50 seconds, and that put him at the back, and so he finished 19th. I mean, I'll give them credit. The car, you can at least spot it easily. Them and McLaren stand out immediately. The bright orange and the bright green. The rest of them, under the lights at night, you can't tell them apart. So for them, again, things have improved marginally, but they could do with some new drivers, and obviously their junior Zane Maloney just annihilated everyone in Formula 2 this weekend, so maybe we'll see him there next year.
Yeah, Joe couldn't have he couldn't catch Stroll because he pitted, I think, on the same lap or a lap before, so he was the first one to pit for his final stint, and I thought he would just lose his tires, but he didn't, and it was amazing because at some point he was running P8 or P9 because of the undercut. For I think after the first stint, after the first pit stop, he was running in P8 or P9 because he had undercut everyone, and he was on this early pit stop strategy where he was just undercutting everyone during the entire race, and it worked, and it was amazing. And I feel bad for him because any other year, and I'm sure Peter, you might have some stats about season openers for this. Any other year, maybe before 2023, Joe would have gotten P9 or P8. He's so unlucky that we're in an era where DNFs simply don't happen. Yesterday was yet another example of that. I was convinced Sargent was giving us a DNF, but he wasn't. And any other race, a race like Joe's yesterday would have given 2 or 4 points because you would have had a McLaren DNF, an Aston Martin DNF, maybe Merc gets a mechanical issue. But it's such a shame to drive what was a faultless race from him, and he gets P11 because there are no DNFs from the top 5 teams, and he was nowhere near Stroll in the end. I think there were 9 seconds between them.
Yeah, it was close at first, and I thought he would catch him, but he just drifted backwards, which was annoying. Yeah, but then also, as well as them, we had Williams, which similar kind of story to last year, to be honest. I mean, Q1 elimination for Logan Sargent again, Q2 for Albon. Logan Sargent was 6 tenths off Albon. Not much has changed. I mean, people have said he seems more focused and determined, and it's like, okay, but he's got a year of experience under his belt, and he said he gained like 5 kilograms of muscle. In the race, he made up a couple of places. He was up to 14th, I think, and then he just goes off at turn 4, gets stuck there for a while. I thought it was going to be a breakdown. I was waiting for a safety car, and then he got the car going again, had to pit, and then he ended up being lapped twice. And I think the first people thought it was his brakes, and then I think afterwards they said basically his steering wheel just kind of shut down, and so the car just went straight on. So not his fault, but yeah, just obviously annoying. I mean, he wouldn't have scored points, but it seemed like he was fairly close to Albon. Albon himself was pretty anonymous in the race. He didn't do. We saw some helmet cams, but I didn't see much else that stood out, and he finished 14th in the end. Yeah, no, 15th. You would have.
I did see his display though, and it said engine too hot.
Yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it? The end, his steering wheel was being funny, and I think he said it kept disappearing, or the screen kept going blank, or whatever.
Yeah, I think he had to press a blue button, and then that would change his whole screen, and it didn't happen. It just didn't function at all.
Mm.
Yeah, the Merc-engine cars generally, I think this section could just be about all those Merc-engine cars because Williams, Albon P15, and his most entertaining moment of the race, as Wimbo said, was his steering wheel just being funny. Sargent went off. But all the Merc-engine cars, generally, they were nowhere really yesterday. McLaren, Merc, and Aston Martin were just absolutely nowhere in terms of pace. They were just messing around between P5 and P10. Aston Martin are clear fifth. There was no way Alonso was going to make up places, and there was no way. Stroll had a very good race, by the way. He had a very good recovery drive, but P10 was where he would have been anyway. That's the sad thing. Even if he wasn't punted by Hulkenberg, he would have finished P10 for sure. So Aston Martin was in no man's land. McLaren and Merc seem to have very similar pace, and I think if Lando had not messed up his Q3 lap, he would have finished ahead in this Merc engine fight. But generally, it's worrying for them because they seem to be. It could be a track dependent issue, and maybe in Jeddah they're going to be better. But McLaren, Merc, and Aston Martin seem to be clearly under the top two teams. Our producer just told me Alonso already has twice as many points as Stroll will have, which I think will only increase. But yeah, I just wanted to know what you guys think about those three Merc engine teams because I don't think it's going to be a very entertaining year from them.
Well, they finished in the positions that I have them in my prediction. But I have Red Bull and Ferrari as number 1 and 2, and then McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston Martin. That's what I predicted up front, and so far it's pretty much looking that way. It's going to be tight between those three teams. You know, we're going to see a lot of Piastri, Hamilton, Russell, Alonso. There's going to be 5 drivers battling it out. The only one who's not going to be in the fight is Lance Stroll, because he'll be fighting Joe and Bottas. But that's my prediction.
I mean, based off testing and also how last year ended, I think people thought McLaren were going to be second fastest, and that's obviously not the case now. I hadn't really thought of that. But yeah, we've got the 3 Merc teams all running more or less together. I mean, Aston Martin seem to have become Alpine because qualifying was, there or there, or Alonso at least, as usual, was kind of there or thereabouts with Mercedes and McLaren. But then the race pace, he was noticeably slower, and he did get passed by Hamilton in the end. And Hamilton also got past Oscar, who had a slow pit stop. So yeah, they kind of ran in no man's land. I mean, Stroll, to be fair to him, it wasn't terrible. Because he did get a knock at the start, but then he still managed to finish 10th.
Driver of the day. He was arguably driver of the day because he did do a recovery drive from last to P10, and yesterday on my poll, everyone was saying Lance Stroll was driver of the day, which seemed to be a bit of a stretch, but that's the thing with Lance. When he does a good race, it stands out so much in a year that people have to praise it.
Yeah, no. For me, Sainz is still driver of the day because he was being racy, and I guess also he was battling both Leclerc and his own team is the sort of narrative going on there. But yeah, no, it was a good one from Stroll that he wasn't miles away from Alonso, and he gained positions in the race. Yeah, McLaren, it was just a bit of McLaren and Mercedes. It was just a bit of a dud because George, well, he got up to second early on, and then apparently started having power unit problems, and he dropped back to fifth. But he was looking racy at the start. Lewis, by comparison, was pretty invisible, and we've seen that a lot in the past 2 years. Now that he's not in the fastest car, he doesn't stand out just by virtue of being able to lead and do this stuff. Is that he passed Alonso because Aston Martin's race pace is much worse. And then he managed to pass Piastri because he did the undercut and Piastri had a slow pit stop. But so he went from 8th to 6th. So pretty anonymous. Again, he's somebody because, again, like with Sainz, he's the outgoing driver. So we're not necessarily expecting any favours from Mercedes towards him, whereas George is there for the long term. So, yeah, slightly worse McLaren and Aston Martin is the main take, but Mercedes are basically where they were last year.
Okay, well, you mentioned Piastri's slow pit stop. Something quite special happened when he came out of the pits. They have tire warmers now that heat up the tires only 70 degrees. And the way he slid off the track, that could have been a big accident. So my take on it is to let them have tire warmers that heat up the tires much more, like they had before. And that would have made that fight between Hamilton and Piastri much more exciting. Whereas Formula One says, oh no, we want to get rid of the tire warmers because, yeah, I don't know why that's a thing actually. Can you guys tell me that? What's happening there?
Isn't it to do with the energy saving and sustainability?
Oh, right.
I think that's what because the thing is they don't have tire warmers in WEC and they don't have them in Formula 2 or Formula 3. But the thing is, if they're doing this in Formula 1, they're going to need to make better tires. That's why everyone is saying don't get rid of tire warmers because these tires will not work. You'll lock immediately after coming out of the pit lane if they're just at like atmospheric temperature. Yeah, so that would be they would need to make better tires, and they should make better tires anyway. Because I'm just a bit sick of 13 years now of useless Pirelli tires that you can't push on and always have problems. Yeah, I mean he depending on obviously he wasn't going to hit anyone, but obviously if you come out of the pits at a sharp corner and drift, you could easily knock someone if there's somebody on the outside of you. And yeah, if the tires just don't work, it is a way of causing a crash. But it's they would just need better tires. They would need to completely redesign the compound if they're going to have to be ones that don't need tire warmers.
But could have Piastri with warmer tires could have made that corner the way he wanted to take it?
Well, I'm sure he could have taken it normally because he went very. I mean, it was so close because he had the slow stop and Hamilton had the undercut. He took a big dive just to get ahead of him. He maybe could have stayed ahead because obviously he did drift outwards, and that meant he just got a poor exit and wouldn't have had DRS, I don't think. So maybe he might have got back ahead. But then the thing is, as the race went on, his tires were 1 lap younger, but he drifted to 3.5, 4 seconds behind Lewis. So he wasn't obviously faster and didn't seem to be able to challenge him for that position.
It would have made a difference for that fight, particularly, but not for the rest of the race.
No.
By
this point in the race, everyone was too spread out to change. I mean, most of the action we saw was in the first stint, but then everyone else had spread out by the second and third.
Yeah, that's the issue. And I think Piastri could have actually fought Lewis. There were no fights because everyone was undercutting or over. Well, in this race, just undercutting everyone. So it was so easy to just undercut someone. And even if you would come out next to a driver, like it was the case for Lewis and Oscar, the driver who had warmed up their tires for 1 or 2 laps would have the advantage every single time. And then the driver who would come out behind wouldn't catch up. And that's quite a big issue right now. I don't know how they're going to fix it. Well, we left the only piece of real drama for the end in terms of topics about the race. Toro Rosso, Minardi, AlphaTauri, VCARB, however you want to call them. What was that? So Tsunoda is on hards, trying to catch up Magnussen, who's also on hards for P12 with 5 laps to go. team orders to ask for Tsunoda to let Ricciardo pass, who's on softs. To be fair, that's the only difference between Tsunoda and Ricciardo at that point. But the softs are now, I think, 9 or 10 laps old, so they have about the same performance levels as hards, if not worse, because after a certain period, obviously the hards become more efficient than the softs. And Tsunoda doesn't want to because he is literally half a second behind Magnussen. Having to let Ricciardo pass at that point makes him lose time, Ricciardo lose time, and just makes it harder for everyone. But VCARB is, I'm just going to call it VCARB. VCARB are adamant that Tsunoda should let Ricciardo pass. He eventually folds because it starts to get heated. Ricciardo starts to get annoyed about it. And Ricciardo doesn't make the move either, not helped by the fact that obviously he had lost time behind Tsunoda, but also not helped by the fact that I'm not sure he was the most keen to get P12 from Kevin Magnussen at the season opener. So obviously Tsunoda gets annoyed, a bit too annoyed, as we know, with the young Japanese driver. And he dive bombs Ricciardo after the race, which is, I think, by all accounts, unacceptable. He's in his 4th season. Sure, he can get annoyed because he knows the politics at VCAP at the moment. All the politics want Ricciardo to make the move up to Red Bull. Christian Horner, we saw it in Drive to Survive Season 6. He absolutely loves Ricciardo. I think Tsunoda, he sees that the world is against him. But you're not exactly making a point for yourself by dive bombing your teammate after the race.
Yeah. I think generally, for me, it's the first race of the year. They're not contesting for points. It's kind of outrageous to be doing team orders. Do they honestly think that if Ricciardo passes Magnussen in 3 laps, he's going to then get Joe, and then he's going to gain 10 seconds on Stroll and pass him? Like, what is the point? And this is when they'd already basically almost rigged it by putting him on the better strategy, because the only 2 strategies we saw were soft, hard, hard, and soft, hard, soft. So he started, Ricciardo started 14th and finished 13th. Tsunoda started 11th and finished 14th. And most of the race,
11,
Tsunoda...
may I add, 5 thousandths of P10. So he was again in this P11 spot that he was in so often last year. And he keeps just lacking milliseconds to make it to P10 because Tsunoda makes Q3. Ricciardo is 14th. That completely changes the narrative.
Yeah, and he spent most of the race fighting P11 with Joe, and then Stroll comes through and means that's not the case. But then his fight, yeah, it was also not well timed. It's like, let him through now, because Tsunoda, he did eventually let Ricciardo through, but then they got blue flags almost immediately. So that took away a whole lap of opportunity to then get Magnussen. He couldn't pass him. They both closed up to Magnussen right at the end. And yeah, I can see that he would be annoyed. He would be annoyed because and we saw the move he did at the end, because I'm sure he knows more about the internal politics. That, yeah, he's been with this team for 4 years now. The whole point behind it is that you use it as a stepping stone for Red Bull. It doesn't seem that that's happening, and instead what they're doing is bringing in a driver who has done all of that already 10 years ago. And like, oh, let's try again. Let's bring him back up to Red Bull. And he's the only person who seems really desperate to go up to Red Bull just to get beaten by Max again. And so I think also because Tsunoda, because last year he took on this kind of leadership role in the team. He was beating De Vries, and then he was beating Ricciardo, but then he was getting beaten by Liam Lawson. And so there's just a lot of mismatch in the drivers that they want, but yet they weren't fighting for points. What is the point of doing team orders? Like, it doesn't matter.
It's almost like there's some Ferrari element in the strategy of RB. Like there's a new team principal that used to work for Ferrari. I'm referring to Mekis.
I'm trying to remember, because I remember, of course, they do have a new the curly-haired guy. I've forgotten his name now.
Is it not Laurent Mekis?
That's the one, yeah.
That was the joke I was trying to make.
But yeah, I'd forgotten that.
I don't know what's going on there, because it's politics at a team that, again, I need to mention they're underachieving from the expectations from last week, because all of a sudden last week, while Alpine was seen as backmarkers, people were saying that VCOB could be challenging for podiums this year.
Yeah, well, people say so much before a season. I think what happened between Ricciardo and Yuki is that it's being hyped up so much that the winner of that battle between them gets a bigger chance of the Red Bull seat, that they're going to be fighting each other tooth and nail all season. And it doesn't matter if it's for P12 or P13 or for a point. They just want to beat each other. And Ricciardo, he thought it was quite handy that Yuki was going to move out of the way, so he could at least beat him in the standings for the first race. And Yuki obviously didn't want that because he thought he had an opportunity to still get the driver in front of him. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because they both think they have an opportunity to get into Red Bull. I don't think either of the one will get into that seat. My estimation is that Perez will just keep his seat at Red Bull, because if he performs the way he did this race, then there's no reason to replace him at all. He's not causing any trouble. He's putting the car in a decent spot for qualifying, which isn't his strongest point. And he's finishing P2. What more can you ask?
Yeah, it's a surprisingly simple job, actually, being the number 2 at Red Bull, because all you have to do is finish second. You don't have to worry about winning or anything, and it's like almost anyone can do that. So if he can do that all season, it's like, yeah, we may as well keep him, because he's not there to beat Max. He's just there to support him. He's there to beat everyone else. With Tsunoda, though, I feel like I must add, Mexico last year, when Checo crashes out at the start, and there was all this sympathy, and they were making him do the rounds around the paddock as if they were probably planning his retirement announcement, and then they decided to just postpone that because of PR, and also this is when all the racism stuff with Helmut Marko came out. That in one sense that crash saved his career. That same race, Tsunoda himself has a bit of an off at the first turn, which ruins his race. He didn't get anywhere near the same level of sympathy. He's there, but I think he's basically just there at the mercy of Honda. That's the thing, and he probably knows if I was going to be moved up to Red Bull, they would have done it by now, because nobody else has spent this long at Toro Rosso and then moved up to Red Bull. That's not what the team is designed for. And then you have to throw in Lawson in the mix, who should be in one of those seats.
Yeah.
And so you can easily say next year, well, if Checo goes, Ricciardo goes up, and then Lawson takes the seat, that's fine. But whenever it is that Red Bull lose this Honda deal, that's probably when they lose Tsunoda as well, and then maybe he goes to Aston Martin, or maybe he just goes off and does nothing else, because his mentality, his driving has improved. He doesn't crash as much as when he was a rookie, but he's still getting too hot-headed and maybe not being diplomatic. But then, to be honest, I kind of get it when it seems like everything is just rigged against him.
Yeah, I fully understand that, because so many people are trying to be the great. You always get that online after fights between Formula One drivers. Everyone online thinks they are the peaceful, neutral, good person, and they know more about how they shouldn't have fought and how they should have behaved. You're talking about a driver who, as you said, spent 3 years at the junior team, now starting his 4th year there, and he's seeing all those other candidates be hyped up more than he is, sometimes rightfully so, but sometimes, Yuki has actually outperformed them. So just as a human sometimes, especially a human who is in an F1 car and in an F1 career where it's extremely competitive and your entire career is at stake, your entire legacy is at stake, obviously you're going to be annoyed. Now, that shouldn't translate into dive bombing your teammate after the race. But the fact Yuki gets frustrated, I hate that I see so people online criticize it as if they know he should have done differently. Because we keep asking about drivers to be, we keep asking drivers to be more human. And then when we do get one or two human drivers like Tsunoda or Alonso who aren't scared to say things or do things, 80% of the F1 community goes up against them because they shouldn't have done that. It's double standards which don't really work.
No. Well, the thing is that you can refuse to give up a position, like Verstappen did in what was it, Malaysia 2015 against Sainz, where he was lapped because he had an issue, and then he fought himself all the way back to P7, and he had to move out of the way for Sainz, and he said no. But see, you have to back up your, you have to put your money where your mouth is. So you can be lippy and cheeky, but then you need the performance to back it up. And in the 4 years that Yuki Tsunoda has been racing, there's been decent performances, but not enough to allow him to have a big mouth on him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that takes us to our rankings of the race. We always rank, it's been a few months now, but we always rank our top three. It could be in an order if you want, it could be in no order. I usually do not really put an order to my top threes. And your flop of the race. So starting with the top three, what was your top three performers? Who were your top three performers, Wimbo?
I think it's just the top three on the podium. I don't know if that's too boring, but those three haven't set a foot wrong all race. So yeah, there's not much more I can say about that actually.
And yeah, for me, well, Sainz, I mean, he was driver of the day, and I think he should be. Yep, Stroll, good recovery drive, and then Max, because he did everything he needed to do. Put on a very good Vettel impersonation.
Yeah, same here. Sainz, Verstappen, and well, you've given credit to Stroll. He deserves it. I'm going to give credit to Zhou because I think he was good with tire conservation. Yeah, conservation, and that's Sauber. I don't think anyone expected it to be there in P11. Talking about our flop of the race. Usually you talk about drivers here, but you just have to talk about a team, and I'm going to put Alpine there. You have some candidates like some people were harsh to Leclerc, for example, but yeah, I'm going to put Alpine as my flop of the race. And by the way, honorable mention to the top three performers. Magnussen also drove a very good race.
Okay, well, my flop of the weekend is a team as well, and that's Mercedes. They weren't quite there in qualifying, although Russell put it on P3. Then Hamilton, specified that he put his car into a more racy setting instead of a more qualifying session. And he starts P8, and I think he finished P8 or P7. A team like that having these issues they were saying they were having, that's not a good look either, for a team that wants to compete with Red Bull. Like they shouldn't have, with their organization, have these kind of issues. So the flop of the weekend is the whole Mercedes team, but in particular Lewis Hamilton himself.
It's difficult to find a flop specifically because there wasn't anyone where it was like a desperately bad race. The people that had bad races, there was some kind of technical misfortune or something out of their hands. I suppose maybe the flop is just the entire Grand Prix, because it was it didn't surprise me that we picked up where we left off. But yeah, it was just a dull season opener, and it makes me concerned if this is what we're getting for the rest of the season, because that does damage viewership, and then that damages engagement on YouTube as well, which is something that as content creators we kind of depend on. We need people to be watching this sport to want to watch our commentaries on it, even if I only talk about things that happened in the past. So I think because at the moment it seems like, okay, this is going to be Max is getting his 4th title. 25, okay, Hamilton's at Ferrari. That's going to get a lot of attention. There might be a lot of new drivers, but again, it could be the same thing. If we get to 2026 and Red Bull is still winning and Max dominates again, even with these brand new regulations, that's really, really not good for the sport. I don't know what's going to happen then.
Drive to Survive Season 6's viewership for the first 3 days, because that's how they usually take up their stats, had decreased by 31%, which is abysmal. I think only 2.9 million people watched it, which for Netflix numbers is abysmal. If Drive to Survive is going down, that means F1 viewership is going down. And the only reason this episode is more than an hour is because it was the season opener and we had new things to talk about. Jeddah, if it goes the same way, the review is going to be, 15 minutes? Because, yeah, there was nothing really happening. It was just concerning to watch as a Formula One fan, because so many people were just complaining about falling asleep, watching the second half later on. And actually, that takes us to ranking the race out of 5. Personally, I would give it 2, and I'm not usually harsh with my race ratings, but this was a 2-star race. And usually, season openers never go lower than 3, because you get new things and you get DNFs and you get some chaos. But no, this was 2 out of 5.
Yeah, same. If it wasn't the season opener, it would be a 1 out of 5. But because it had that, uncertainty going into it, that makes it a 2.
Yeah, well, it's nobody's fault that there were no DNFs. You can barely tell the teams to make the engines a bit crappy, so they conk out after a few laps. If Sargent had not got the engine going again, and it would have been a safety car, that would have made a difference for the whole race. It would, the pack should have closed up, and I think it's just all the circumstances, no DNFs, no crashes. The teams that are meant to attack Red Bull having issues all led to this result. But for Jeddah, Ferrari and Mercedes and McLaren and Red Bull could be on it, and we could have a major crash halfway through the race that would set the whole race up again. Everything that happened that put towards a negative race could happen to create a positive race the next one.
Yeah, that's a good point. One piece of copium a lot of fans have been relying on is what Lando said. Norris said that Red Bull's strengths are most put forward at Bahrain. So at every other race, they should have less of an advantage on the rest of the field. We'll see how that goes. We'll soon see. The next race is in a week. But this takes us to the much more interesting and competitive part of the weekend, which isn't Formula One, but Formula 2 and Formula 3. Well, Formula 2 have a lot of reasons this year to be followed and watched. If it hasn't been put forward enough to you guys, to you listeners, Antonelli and Behrman, they're the main characters of this 2024 season because of how prospective they are to the F1 grid and how nearly certain they are of getting a Merc and Ferrari seat at some point. But they weren't up there this weekend. The Prema team just wasn't there. They messed up the setups in quali, and then in the race, recovery drives, but still not great performances. The standout for sure was the man who won the two F2 races. Zayn Maloney, newly Sauber junior, after being released by Red Bull a few months ago, he becomes only the 10th driver to win both the sprint and the feature race of Formula 2. since 2005, since, well, it's called GP2 and has this format. Other F2 double winners include Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Hülkenberg, Antonio Giovinazzi. So it's a very good accolade to have on your CV, and especially on a season opener when, you know, not much happened in Formula One. So people will be talking about Zane Maloney's incredible performance.
Particularly so as, you know, he's a Sauber junior, and the two Sauber drivers we have at the moment are not the most interesting or vibrant in their driving styles. That maybe this would infuse a bit of energy into the team, since they well, Théo Pourchaire, he seemed to assume he was getting a seat in 22 and then just didn't, and now he's been exiled to Japan to race in Super Formula after winning Formula 2, where he'll probably be forgotten about. Especially if Zane is going to come up like this, put himself, because both of them are reserve drivers for Sauber. But the thing is, Zane Maloney will be at every race, whereas we'll probably see Pourchaire do FP1 in Suzuka, but otherwise he's going to be in Japan all the time. Yeah, I mean, it'd be good to have him, just someone new. Also, he'd be the first ever Caribbean Formula One driver, so that would be new as well. Of course, he's the boy from Barbados. Formula 2 in general is really interesting. There's a really, really interesting mix of drivers, because, like we mentioned, Kimi Antonelli is the one that everyone is hyper focused on. Ollie Behrman, who was doing 6 FP1 sessions for Haas this year, and so it looks like he's being set up to go to them in 2025. Kimi is doing an extensive testing with Minardi, and I think Mercedes, and I think people are hoping that he might take Lewis's seat as a Mercedes junior. And then you've got we mentioned Zane Maloney. Victor Martins, again, the sort of second most senior Alpine junior after Jack Doohan. He's still doing it. Dennis Hauger is now a bit of a lone ranger, having left Red Bull, but he's just hovering. Ritomo Miata, he's a very interesting one, because he's not actually a junior, because he's done the double whammy in Japan of winning Super GT and Super Formula, which are not feeder series. And he's older than the other drivers. He's a lot more experienced, and he not really raced much in Europe, but he's a very interesting prospect to see if he's going to attempt to get a seat in Formula One.
Yeah, Miyata never raced outside East Asia before a few days ago. Well, before Formula 2 testing, and he's 24, which is insane. But still, I want to say the commentators worldwide who keep talking about Super Formula as if it was a feeder series. Super Formula is faster than Formula 2, and I think on most instances is faster than IndyCar. It's very it has similar pace, but I know that on some circuits, if you just go on your sim rack, you will get a faster lap on a Super Formula car. So he has a lot of experience. He is not a junior, but other juniors, well, other people who are actually juniors, the rookies, Bortoletto and Pepe Marti, they were incredible this weekend.
Yeah, because of course Bortoletto, defending Formula 3 champion, he's a McLaren junior, if you consider that a thing. They basically resurrected the junior program just so he had somewhere to call himself a junior, because he won the title, which is the same thing that Aston Martin did with Drugovich, who I think he's going to become old news very quickly, having had Pourchaire and then whoever takes the title this year supersede him. But we also saw, like, there are a couple of howlers. I mean, Roy Nassani is gone at last. Richard Verschoor is still there for some reason. Amory Cordial is hanging around. He's got his Belgian Cordial Construction Company money funding him. Like, but I'm going to start repping Joshua Dirksen, because he's the other one, like Ante, that came up from Frecker, and he finished 11th in the feature race in the slowest team, and he's the one that he's there for money, because like Rafael Villagomez is another one that's come up for money, but he actually did all right. So the general standard is good. And another thing is because they have a new generation of cars. So now the current Formula 2 cars, the old ones that everyone hated, are gone. These ones are basically the same as Formula 1 cars. They have the ground effects, they have the wacky wings. And so if Maloney can drive this well in these cars, that does bode well for Formula 1, that it would say, okay, he's going to drive them in a similar manner.
Yeah, definitely. Wimbo, who are your favorites for Formula 2 this year, actually?
I have my own business, and I have a family with 2 kids. I'm obsessed with Formula 1, and I try to stick with one obsession. So I don't follow F2 and F3. I do read the tweets of the likes of Tomo. So some of the names you've mentioned are familiar to me. I know Nissani was a bit of he wrecked the place usually all the time, and I know Porsche was good because he won last year, and then he never got the seat in F1, same as Drogovic and Piastri in his first season outside of F2. But for the rest, I don't know much about it. Is Iwasa still in F2, the Red Bull Junior?
Super Formula, but he's still a Red Bull Junior, I think. But they put him into Super Formula, so I don't know what the point of that is.
I saw a video of Break with Liam Lawson talking about Super Formula. That was pretty interesting because it's all Japanese tracks, and there's races racing those races for the last 10 years, and you're going up against them. So what I'm hearing is that Super Formula is a pretty competitive competition.
Yeah, definitely. And we talked about how Red Bull have an issue with Lawson, who's waiting, and Tsunoda and Ricciardo who are fighting. Well, Peter, you will have seen Pepe Marti. He started P12 in both races, and then in both races he made up, what was it, 10, then 9 spots. So 10 spots in the sprint race and then 9 spots in the feature race. Again, this is a race that most fans would have watched because motorsport starts again, but most team principals will also have followed. So you get a rookie who does P12 to P2 and then P12 to P3 when your two Red Bull Junior team drivers start squabbling over P12 for no reason. That puts you even more in a hot seat.
Yeah. I mean, Pepe Marti, because last year he was in Formula 3, he was basically the only driver that did any overtakes all year.
Yeah.
He had races where he went from last to top 5 in a 30-car grid, which does not happen. Every single race in Formula 3 is just DRS trains. But the thing is, the new cars are working and the racing was even closer. But the thing is, Formula 1, it's so close, it's basically a spec series. I mean, the field spread in qualifying was not much different from Formula 2 or Formula 3. And it's so if he's making those kind of moves, it's like, yeah, why not? Give him a go. It's just Red Bull that all of the driver academies are a sham in one way or another because they're either too congested or they're not congested enough and they're not giving opportunities to drivers that deserve it. Red Bull have a perpetual problem of having too many drivers. People come and go very quickly. Since 2005, there have been since 2001, there have been over 100 members of the Red Bull Junior team.
I've seen that video.
Yes,
that you made.
Most of them lasted less than a year. You'd be surprised how many drivers have been Red Bull Juniors that you would know at one time or another in the past. But with them, they have because they recently Jack Crawford left them, and he's now an Aston Martin junior. He came out and basically said one of the biggest problems is that Helmut Marko, he doesn't really pay attention to the races. He looks at your end result and where you are in the championship, and that's how he decides it. He doesn't really take into account if you gain positions in races or if you had lots of engine failures. And then that's always been a big thing in Formula 2 is they say you getting mecha chromed, that if your engine's blowing up all the time when you don't deserve it. And that's something where they might understand that's not your fault, but it still takes away super license points, which you need to get to Formula 1. But Red Bull is too congested. Sauber, they should have thrown in Porsche in place of Bottas and Joe, and I desperately hope they do with Zane Maloney. Alpine, again, is quite congested, but there doesn't seem to be much room for mobility, because I don't know how willing they're going to be to get rid of Ocon and Gasly, but also that team has got loads of other problems on top of that. And then Mercedes have gotten by with having, 2 drivers, just Kimi and Vesti somehow. They're all, it creates a headache, but I think the main thing, because this is the first time we've gone into a season with no rookies. If there had just been one rookie, that would have at least made things a bit different in this race, but that's why it's like 2023 part 2. 2025. I'm hoping we see a lot of driver changes. We need to get rid of some of the cobwebs, get a few people out. A lot of the drivers are out of contract. We just need to think something just needs to change, basically.
Yeah, you mentioned all those driver academies. One that you didn't mention was Williams as well, because Williams have good drivers coming through with O'Sullivan, who got podiums, who got podium in the feature race, and Luke Browning, who won the race by quite some margin in Formula 3. But again, he's 22, which by Formula 3 standards are quite old. Is quite old.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're seeing those Williams junior drivers doing well, and Sargent is probably going to be out of a seat for next year. But what's going to happen to them? Nothing, because I think Antonelli is going to go there. If Mercedes are sensible, they aren't going to just throw Antonelli into a Merc. We're no longer in that stage of Formula One where you can just do that. And Lewis Hamilton was pretty much the only driver who had that privilege. They're going to probably put Antonelli in the Williams, and then the entire driver academy is going to see it and be like, why are we here?
Yeah, because the Williams Academy, the one driver you didn't mention was Franco Colapinto, because he's another one that's very well hyped, and he's probably the best. I keep describing him as the most like senior of their juniors. I think he's probably the best one because it's him and O'Sullivan in F2, and then you've got Luke Browning in Formula 3. Ollie Gray left F3. He's doing something else now, but he's still a junior. Jamie Chadwick is still a junior, but she's doing Indy Next, and she's not doing it particularly well. Yeah, one of those two. But yeah, Logan, he's going to be gone. I mean, yesterday was not his fault, but still, it's just like if he doesn't improve, there's no point keeping him because his uncle is really wealthy, but doesn't give him any money. So I don't know what he's bringing, because he's not even that well known in America, so he doesn't bring like the American market either. But yeah, I think unless Kimi somehow annihilates everyone this year, he's probably going to Williams. That's more realistic because obviously this first weekend it was a bit shaky. He kind of arrived a bit in the feature race. He was making some moves. Sprint race was pretty invisible. But it's just it's a bit ridiculous the way he gets hyped up because they said, oh, he was doing some wet weather testing and he was 4 seconds faster than everyone else. It's like, that doesn't happen. Nobody is 4 seconds faster than anyone in the wet. And then they say, oh, he's the best junior we've seen since Verstappen. It's like, you're really... The thing I want to make people think about is, okay, yes, he was very, very impressive in Frecker, but also it's Frecker. Half the drivers there don't even have their own Wikipedia articles. Like, it's not really a good benchmark. Making him skip Formula 3 was a huge risk. But yeah, if they're going to play it safe, they'll put him in the Williams. But for the rest of the juniors, particularly if Franco Colapinto has a really good year, he's going to be like, well, why haven't I got that seat? You put him in, he's not even a Williams junior. And Williams, James Vowles is trying to make a point of not making Williams a support team or a B team to Mercedes, which Toto is desperate to do, because Toto seems to want them to give the seat to Mick, who's doing WEC, and that's a whole other thing as well. Yeah, we just need more teams. Bring in Andretti, bring in High Tech, bring HRT back. Let's just have 13 teams, and that will solve the problems. And we can actually throw some interesting drivers in instead of having to watch Bottas do nothing every race.
Yeah, fully agree. Especially as and Antonelli, at least he beat Behrman, and that's what he had to do this weekend. But this weekend, Formula 2 was better than Formula 1. It's as simple as that.
Indeed, which is unfortunate, but it means that even if Formula 1 flops, I would recommend that people pay attention to Formula 2 and Formula 3. But yeah, I think that brings this episode to a close. Shame it wasn't a better season opener. There have been worse races, but at the end of the day, we're only one race in. I'm sure it will get better, but we just need to be patient.
Yeah, I hope it's going to get better. I hope teams are going to improve and catch up to Red Bull. That's all we can hope for.
I'm looking forward to the smashing Jeddah review on this channel because it's going to be a great race. I'm a kind of glass half full kind of person.
I mean, the circuit has a propensity for kind of wacky races because of how narrow. So I think we'll see a few accidents, but I don't know. I'm not massively looking forward to it, but we got a few other ones. Australia and Japan, they're always fun, but we'll have to see.
If
But
there are
yeah,
no DNFs in Jeddah, then I will have given up on reliability, because you cannot have no DNFs in Jeddah. That's too much reliability. Just have those evil gremlins from Cars 2 with lasers again, because you cannot have 20 cars finish in Jeddah.
and I think also
Maybe we need more brake checking on the DRS straight.
I think also for me that would be objective proof that these cars have never been easier to drive. If you can't crash at Jeddah, because 50 years ago the drivers would have just refused to drive there. They would have said this is more dangerous than Spa. They wouldn't have done it. But yeah, that's not long away. Well, only 6 days away now. So I guess we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, thank you as ever to Nav, and thank you to Wimbo for joining us. Where can people find you on the airwaves?
I have a YouTube channel. It's called Wimbo Formula. I make for Formula One content about recent events, and every once in a while I'll throw in an older topic. I'm still growing. I have 1,600 subscribers now, so if you want to help me grow, then watch some of my content and smash that subscribe button, as they like to say in these parts. And thanks for having me. I enjoyed talking to really knowledgeable F1 fans. Thanks very much.
You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.